Good morning and welcome this morning to something a little bit different than we usually would do here on Digital Solutions. And that's to get really niche onto something, specifically the idea of marketing the men. I'm Dante St. James. Welcome. We've got a few of us in the room today. If you are on live, feel free to ask questions using the webinar chat and the Q&A as part of Zoom. If you're coming to us through YouTube, please just leave the comments on the bottom and we'll be able to answer those as we get on there as well. For now, though, I'll share that screen and we will get underway. It's going to be a bit of fun, a little bit of a trip down memory lane, but also I think a look forward to the future that can really help us to get a better idea of what's appropriate when marketing the men and what might be left in the past. First of all, we're going to look at today is a little of the history and the assumptions around marketing the men. We're going to move into a few examples of some really good men's marketing programs and campaigns, as well as some of the stereotypes that seem to be quite pervasive when it comes to marketing the men and that might be not helpful to us either as businesses trying to sell a product or service to men or to reach them with a program or some kind of service. And then finally, we'll look at what we reckon men want and how to deliver that. Now, asking what men want is like asking what women want. How long is a piece of string? People are individuals, and there's many, many different things that different people want. But we'll be looking at some of those big stories about what men are looking for and how to reach them in a very specific way through your marketing. First up, this is brought to you by Business Station and the Digital Solutions Program, an Australian government initiative. You can sign up at digitalsolutions.businessstation.com.au, but most of you have probably already done that, hence why you're on this webinar right now. My background is as a Meta certified lead trainer, digital marketing associate, media buyer, media planner, creative consultant, and forget what the other certification is. Marketing science professional was the other one. I also worked with Business Station through their digital solutions and their self-employment services program in Darwin with Workforce Australia. I do some work with the Be Connected program, which is helping elderly Australians to access online services and the digital economy, as well as Google's Digital Springboard program. So I'm keeping myself nice and busy. Enough about me, though. The history of advertising the men is an interesting one. We all have probably seen some cringeworthy examples of ads from the past. Things such as sex sells. That's always been a very strong theme through advertising the men. You've got to make sure that you attract men by basically using women as a prop in those things. And we can see these ads from the 50s and the 70s, I think the cigarette one is. They're very much about using women as a prop in order to sell an idea to men. Now, this is something which, we couldn't get away with this stuff these days. And some of the wording in these is just so cringeworthy and so wrong that, we're very glad we've moved on from that. But this is examples of exactly the kind of advertising. These are not extreme examples either. These are very average examples of the kind of ads that were pointed to men to buy shaving cream and to buy cigarettes, saying that, making a particular kind of cigarette will help women to follow you everywhere, or that women will be standing around in lingeries and 90s on the phone looking seductively at you if you happen to use a particular kind of shaving cream. Like, we look at these things now and think they're ridiculous. They make no sense. They are completely irrelevant. And how did they ever work? But the problem is that they actually did once upon a time work. These kinds of things did work to attract men to them. And so that the Mennen brand of brushless shave cream became popular simply because it was, well, a couple of things in there. It didn't just mention that sex sells, but it looked at the idea that dermatologists were choosing it for their own daily shaving, that not only that dermatologists were choosing it, it was saying that most dermatologists were using it. So it had that expert authority going along with it. More examples were basically showing power over women. And whilst this was shown to be, as humor and as a way of trying to make men laugh, I can't imagine it was making too many women laugh at the time. Showing that, that a man's world, you wear a tie and a woman will come begging to serve you breakfast in bed while you're wearing a tie. This kind of imagery of, the housewife who burned dinner, but she can't burn the beer. These things are awful. They're just awful. They're just so irrelevant to our current age. And they make us feel like, did this stuff actually work? Did people actually work with this People actually believe some of the messages were given in here, or is this just like, are these fringe examples? And they're not fringe examples. This is how advertising was in the 50s and 60s, that there was that theme of sex sells, but they couldn't say, straight off plain sex on screen. They couldn't do that, but what they would do, they'd insinuate it. And then the power over women was showing that, those silly women and their silly ways, and we men and our ability to be able to command and conquer was all part of that. It was we look at it in cringe now, but this was the opinions of the time. And then there was the expert opinions. I suffered from menstrual cramps. I'm a guy, so I feel sorry for any woman who suffers from menstrual pain, but I also feel sorry for her husband. I recommend Femicin to any woman who's suffering from menstrual pain. So this all-knowing man explains the idea of Femicin, advertising not to women to use it, but to men to get their women to use it. Because otherwise she's going to be unbearable to live with, and she's going to be so uncomfortable to live with, no matter what she's going through at the time. Oh no, what we want to do is make sure the man feels good about himself with that. So cringeworthy it is. And then more doctors smoking Camels than any other cigarette. I think we've learned a lot since then about that. And then they got their T zone, the taste and throat zone, which tells you whether, that your particular cigarettes are smooth or they burn the back of your throat. And of course they do. You're lighting a stick on fire and breathing it in, it's going to burn. But these are the kinds of ads that came up as part of just everyday life to get men to smoke cigarettes and to make their women buy certain medications to calm down the discomfort to themselves of menstrual cramps. These are things that just, we cringe now, but we've changed a lot about how we think about these things, not only through such movements as women's liberation in the 60s and 70s, not so much, not just through efforts such as affirmative action, but through the fact that it just didn't work anymore. This stuff wasn't working anymore. You could say almost anything in the 50s and 60s and people would believe it. If it was on television, people would believe it. If someone on the radio said it, no matter how much that person was paid to say that thing, people would believe it. We believed in advertising. When things were marketed to us, there was no reason for us to believe that they might be lying. And of course, we were burned, I wasn't alive in the 50s and 60s, but people in the 50s and 60s were burned by, comic book ads, which would say to buy sea monkeys. And sea monkeys are brine shrimp. They're dried brine shrimp that you put in water and they come to life magically. And you build this little colony of brine shrimp that apparently are supposed to be like little sea monkeys with crowns on them, building a civilization. And then would be disappointed when really all it was basically glorified fish food. It was just not what was advertised. X-ray glasses used to appear for ads, and even up until the 80s there were ads for these apparent X-ray glasses that you would look at someone and be able to look straight through them, or look at a wall and see straight through it. Now naturally none of that was true. There's no such thing as X-ray glasses. There certainly wasn't then, and there isn't even now. But we were burned. So our assumptions then had to change somewhat. We changed the way we thought about things. We used to assume back in those days that men needed to know what women wanted, because that was so important for us to be able to read the mind of the woman, so we'd be able to keep her happy because of happy wife, happy life, all those kind of attitudes. We also assumed that men needed to feel powerful. Men needed to know needed to know that they were the king of the house, the head of the table, the breadwinner, the strong man, the masculine energy over the feminine energy. And we also needed men to have an edge over other men. It wasn't just enough that you had to have power over your woman, you also had to have power over other men. And then you saw the things like Bewitched, where you'd see Darren, who's working at an advertising agency, and when he meets up with his boss, the boss is grouchy and grumpy and always ordering him around. And so there was this power structure, this hierarchy in the workplace where men would tell women what to do, and men would lord it over other men that they were the boss and be always constantly threatening to fire them. And that's the kind of world that was painted for us on television and in fiction. And in some cases, that was definitely what the world was like, especially in the way that women were treated in workplaces back then. Go on, little lady, go make us a cup of tea, right? That sort of thing. Those assumptions were made, and they were kind of true at the time, that men did need to know what women wanted. Men did need to feel powerful. Men did want to have an edge over other men, even if their tie was trendier or more expensive, or the expensive suit. Walk into any legal office these days in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, or Perth, and you see exactly the same thing still at play. Oh, that's an Armani suit, is it? Oh, you must be very successful. Oh, that's an Ed Harry suit. Well, you mustn't be very successful at all. I don't even know if Ed Harry's still around. It could be YD or Connor, or one of those places, or a Lowe's suit. You can buy suits at Lowe's, and you would be the lowest on the rank of people that you work with, because your suit was cheap and nasty, where theirs was Emporio Armani or Versace or some other Italian high-end brand. But then in the 60s, things kind of really changed. In the 60s, what we saw was the emergence of questions being asked, where the baby boomers then came to start to reject some of the things from their parents, the way that their parents lived. They went, well, no, we think there needs to be a different way of thinking. The world as it is isn't working so much. The atom bomb is now around. There's a threat that we could end our lives at any point. This makes life feel very unstable and unsafe. What happened in reality, if those assumptions, that women were making most of the weekly purchasing decisions in the household. So everything from butter through to the clothing that the man would wear, those decisions were made by the woman of the house. And the ideal was then that she wasn't working, he was. So she had the time to go around and make those purchases, make those decisions. The man would come home, give the woman his allowance, the allowance for the household things, and she would go out and spend that money on certain things. So the reality was that even though so much advertising at the time was geared towards men, women were making those purchasing decisions. Men had essentially outsourced the product research to the women in their lives. Sound familiar? It kind of still happens quite a lot. Women were also the biggest influence on major purchasing decisions. Whilst they may not go to that car yard and pick the car out and say, this is the car I want, and do the deal and negotiations, it was usually the woman who actually indicated to the man of what the things needed to be considered for that car to be used, not only for him, but for her to run family errands, for her to be able to operate what's going on in the family. So what happened then was that there was a change of attitude, that why are we advertising to men who aren't even making these decisions? Why are we directing our marketing towards men when women are making all the daily decisions about the way the money's spent in the household? And that grew us into what we call the washing machine factor, and the formation of what was called the washing machine demographic. So you can imagine what this alludes to. The washing machine demographic was all about the people, women between 25 and 39 who were considered to be of childbearing age, or they were at least were bringing up children, who was a primary caregiver and housewife, and probably had a high school education, but didn't really go beyond that. Now, we're talking about the 1960s here. This is quite a while ago, so things were a little bit different. But that washing machine demographic is basically around those who have the greatest need for washing machines, which are women with families. And they'll go, well, the man doesn't really want to concern himself with making the decisions for what washing machine to buy. He'll get caught up in technical specifications and warranties, where she'll just go, is this thing going to wash the clothes in the easiest way possible so I can get on with all the many other things I need to do in my life? So the washing machine demographic was seen to be the people who made decisions about every single purchasing decision in that house. They would essentially, there was a quote from a movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. There's a quote where one of the older women is saying, yes, the man may be the head of the house, but the woman is the neck, and the neck turns the head in whatever direction it wants to. And that was the idea, is that whilst these men were figureheads of their households, and they would make that final big authoritative decision, the reality was that the women were turning that head in the direction they needed to. Women had the greatest lot of influence over what those purchasing decisions would be, because they would research, they would know what those products were. They had the what we used to call the mums network, where they'd actually be able to ask other women in the neighborhood, what do you find with this one? How's this one work? And they compare and they contrast before they ever had to hit a shop floor. By the time he would come into the equation, where they go down to the department store, in my days it was Grace Brothers, some places it might be Myer or Farmers or McDonald and East, or any of those, or Harris Scarf, or one of the different different stores that might have been the big department stores of your youth, and you go off and he'd make that, so make that final purchasing decision based upon the research that she'd already done. So things drastically changed. We had a recognition now that it wasn't men making those decisions, it was women making those decisions. And the reality is now that every piece of marketing that's out there is geared towards that washing machine demographic, even today, 25 to 39. The 1980s arrived and things changed a little bit again. So in the 1980s, we found that women 25 to 39 was still the main demographic, but now you had a hybrid of the mother, the housewife, and the career woman, all in one package. So it's starting, this is when I grew up in the 1980s. So we had this situation where my mum was one of very few women in our neighborhood who were they were housewives. They were at-home mums. Most mums at the time were working in the suburb I grew up in, so it was a little bit unusual to have a mother at home. Now, what happened is that the education standards for women at the time rose remarkably. You saw more women going to university, into colleges, into vocational education, and they were having careers, really good, worthwhile careers. So now, what was happening is that whilst women were still making the majority of those purchasing decisions, and we started to get the rise of the Homer Simpson man, where he didn't really perform much of a task in the house at all, she was essentially running the house. She was running the family, running all the affairs, including all the money, running the taxes, quite often doing all the receipts and making sure the family budget was all together. This is a time when we realize that we definitely should not be advertising to men, because ultimately every decision in everyday life is being made by the women of each family, and that's who we should be advertising to. Again, that washing machine demographic, the 25 to 39-year-olds. As we come forward now to 2023, that's kind of sharpened even more. Now in 2023, it's risen a little bit. Instead of 25 to 39, it's now women 30 to 45, because women are having children later in life. We're getting married later in life. We're forming families and households later in life, because quite often the career part is in the 20s, and it might not be till the 30s till we start thinking about moving into long-term relationships or into families and wanting to have kids. These days, it's much more a shared care and shared household, so that the household tasks, decisions are being made by multiple people in that household, and that the childcare is done shared, or it's even outsourced to childcare providers, so that this is now no longer necessarily a reason for a woman to have to stay in the home unless she chooses to. And higher education is almost an assumed part of it now, where quite often now we find that many university courses are majority women in them. I think the last time I looked at the Charles Darwin University Medicine School, it was like about 80% women in there, and it's fantastic to see. It's just going to show that whilst there's typically been a tendency for education to be limited towards men, now it's very much a woman's world, and it should be. And there's, it just goes to show that things have changed remarkably. But that age of the washing machine demographic has crept up a bit. We may not even look at it as a washing machine demographic anymore. We may call it the family woman, or the woman who is able to, have all of this. A lot of those articles, the BBC article you were seeing maybe over the weekend that was saying that Jacinda Ardern and questioning whether women really can have it all. That's the kind of thing we're fighting against now, is this idea that women can't have it all because they are unable to handle everything the way that men are. But I think we all know very, very differently than that now. So today's examples we're going to use of some of the really good ways that marketing to men is being done include this one, which is the Old Spice campaign. Now, hopefully this sound will come through to you.
But if we stop using lady-scented body wash and switch to Old Spice, hello, ladies. Look at your man. Now back to me. Now back at your man. Now back to me. Sadly, he isn't me. But if we stop using lady-scented body wash and switch to Old Spice, he could smell like he's me. Look down, back up. Where are you? You're on a boat. Your man could smell it. What's in your hand? Back at me. It's an oyster with 2 tickets to that thing you love. Look again. The tickets are now diamond. Anything is possible when your man smells like Old Spice and not a lady. I'm on a horse.
There's one of those hilarious ads, Sean, that came out recently that we just go, wow, It was just so good at what it did. It was so capable of what it did. It really answered the question of how we're now tending to be advertising the man. Now I'm just going to try and get out of this and go to the next screen. There we go. What this did right is it made fun of male stereotypes while still presenting this epic male, this epic powerful male, but it made fun of all those old stereotypes. You know, the whole idea of smelling like a man. Look at your man, look at me, look at your man, look back at me, and I'm what your man could smell like. So it was that fun and taking the mickey out of itself. It didn't pretend to be anything new. Old Spice is a very old fragrance. It's back from the 1950s. This is a very old men's fragrance. It hasn't changed in formula since then. It's the same smell it always was. Kind of like for ladies, for Chanel number 5. It's our Chanel number 5. It's the one that's ever changing, absolutely timeless. It didn't pretend to be anything new. It played on the idea that it's Old Spice. It played on the idea that it's the old male smell. And it flipped to the idea of who the prop was. Instead of using a woman as a prompt, a woman sitting on a horse, lounging over a piano, lounging over a car, standing there in a bikini, introducing a product, now he became this shirtless script, the hot guy who was able to, not just work in terms of advertising the women, because remember, he was talking to women. Look at, hey ladies, look at your fella, look at me, look at your fella, look back at me. Now, all those things that were going on were cleverly not really talking to ladies. It was actually talking to men, because what it said, a man could watch that ad and go, oh yeah, I do smell a bit bad. I need to smell a bit better. I should be not putting on these, what they call lady fragrances. So it was a way of saying to the guy, you know what, you could be doing better. And so much so, we're going to talk to your missus about it because you don't seem to be listening. So we'll talk to her about it, which gets his attention. Very, very clever. It's using a lot of really good psychology tricks to make sure that men are somehow engaging with something which in its very script seem to be talking to women. Another example is this one from Dove. Now, Dove are excellent at forming ads. I remember the Dove self-esteem project from about 2016, I think it was. It was so old that it was in like the old shape of television. This is a similar one, but this is geared towards men.
Gonna be a dad.
So this particular campaign was about making men care and showing that care, and not just, not just doing things just because they looked good for other guys, but actually showing some advice to other men. It ditched all those macho stereotypes. These men were no less men than anyone else. They weren't any less a man than the man on the horse with his shirt off, with diamonds coming out of the palm of his hand. This ditched those macho stereotypes. It showed men crying. It showed men so excited, so excited about the fact that they're going to be a dad. Every time I watch that ad, it mists my eyes, because I look at that and go, this is feeling, this is emotion. And this played on a very powerful thing. It showed that there was empathy to be found in advertising the men. It's not just about Gillette, the best a man can get, and showing buff men shaving their faces with these smooth gliding strokes. It was all about going, well, we're selling skincare for men and for women, but what we want to do is, a man needs to understand that using skincare doesn't make him weak. Showing emotion doesn't make him weak. Caring and having empathy doesn't make a man weak. So by stitching those male stereotypes, you're now able to go, okay, so I associate me feeling something with a product. In the case of Dove for men, it showed us how caring makes men strong. So it has a very strong message that it's putting across there that isn't just buy our product. It's about something much broader. It's about something that comes into a world of commonality amongst many different men. What is the one thing that linked all those men together? They're about to be dads for the very first time. So that's a big link that came in between them. It used candid moments rather than scripted acting. It was like basically like a collection of TikToks really, or Instagram reels, where each of those moments was captured on camera in a very candid way. These were recorded, pre-planned obviously, but they were real moments. These were not actors. And I've read more into that campaign. They actually all were not actors. These are real people who are expressing a very real moment in their lives, which is why it connects with us so deeply. And it made me even want to start crying because it was such a beautiful moment. It may have done the same for you. So that's what it did right. Here's another example. This time it's from the people at Gillette, who I just mentioned before. And this is fun. This is a really interesting one because it's a little bit, it's calling themselves out on some of their previous behavior and marketing campaigns. Have a look at this one. Sorry, I don't know how to make the volume go louder for you. I don't know quite how that works on a Zoom call. So unfortunately, you might not be able to hear this, but just watch for what's on there and you'll start to get the visuals.
Is it? Yeah.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. You can't laugh it off.
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says.
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Come on.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Not cool. Not cool.
Some already are. In ways big
No, man.
and small. But some is not enough.
So how we treat each other, okay?
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
Hopefully by holding the microphone in front of that, you heard a little bit of that. It's calling the men to make changes. And this is no less an emotive kind of ad than the one we showed with Dove. So it was able to show that there's a very different movement towards men's advertising now. It's less about buff guys lifting weights and fighting and showing their strength and wrestling lions. And it's more about wrestling our inner demons and approaching those things that we do wrong. It asks hard questions. It even called on itself out on its previous campaigns. In the very, very beginning, it had people running through the Gillette the best a man can get and asking the question, well, rather than the best a man can get, why don't you ask, is this the best men can be? Can we be better? Can we actually do a little bit better from that? And this was an ad campaign run for men. And there was many different variations of this particular ad used in different places around the world. It used emotion to connect. Because a lot of the men that we were watching that were the kid who was chased, were the kid who was punched, was the kid who was picked on, was the kid who learned some really bad habits from his father and learned to, treat women like objects, the objectification of women, to treat other people like resources to be used. So that whole thing, mansplaining, was even called out in there. It used emotion to connect. It showed us just how icky those things really are. It showed us a mirror unto ourselves. Yet it was advertising that was done for razor blades. So essentially, it puts a connection that goes, I need to shave and use razor blades. And yet this thing is telling me a little bit about who I am and who I'm not. What it did is actually put a position in there for those kind of men who will look at that and just rail against it and say, this is social engineering. People are trying to tell us what to do. That's been going on since the beginning of time. The whole machoification of men's advertising was essentially advertising agencies who were trying to tell men what they should be. Now it's telling them something different. So it's not trying to re-engineer society. It's just looking at what society already is and saying we're repositioning ourselves to move away from that machoification because it's not working anymore. That's the whole reason why these ads are running and other ads aren't, is because that machoification stuff isn't working anymore. Men, particularly in the biggest demographic in our country right now, which is millennials, more people are millennials in our country right now than any other generation. They're the most active in the workforce right now. It's not you would think that after the boomers there'd be Generation X, but no, Generation X is one of the smallest generations in the history of the world. That's what I am, Generation X. So as we move on, we go, okay, in this big lot of millennials, we've got to remember the millennials we were laughing at have got certain attitudes now. The machoification doesn't come with them as a generation. They've got questions. They don't want things to be the same way they were. Approaching marketing to them is very different than what it was when we were marketing to who our 45-year-olds were 30 years ago. So how do we do this? Well, there's another example I've got here, which is a very Australian example, which is to do with beer.
Why'd you bring a case with them?
Because we can.
Because we're fishing.
Because they fit in the chair hole.
Hold up. Who made beer king of the campsite?
It's gonna be a dry.
Stick that, you chair hole.
So again, we're showing a change to the stereotypes, whereas like we go fishing, we go out, we go camping, everything we do has to be associated with an ice cold beer. And it's taking away that assumption, saying, well, actually, what if there was something different to beer? What if we could have something that wasn't beer? What was something else? It questions a common behavior. It uses a lot of humor in that because it actually looks at around. We go, well, why is beer king of the campsite? Why do we just default to drinking beer? Who said that we had to drink beer? What was the rule that said beers? And I see it all over things from dating profiles through this, like, oh, let's meet for beers. I'm like, I don't like beer myself, never have. It also presents the solution as a little bit edgy and countercultural. Canadian Club and Dry is hardly an edgy product, but it's edgy when you go, I'm going to have that instead of a beer because it's a different product. It's a different thing. It's still sweet and it's way too sweet, those canned beverages, but it's saying that this is an idea that runs against that. So it then looks at going, well, how do I differentiate myself amongst all my peers? I do it by having a Canadian Club and Dry rather than having a beer. So that humor, that questioning of a common behavior, that questioning of the status quo becomes a little bit countercultural. And none of those people look particularly countercultural, but it does question the matter. It says, well, why do I drink beer? And that's the ultimate position of that ad, is making you ask the question, why do you drink beer? Why? What specifically is it about beer that you like? Do you actually really like it, or you drink it because that's what you've always had? That's what your educator had. That's what your father had. Therefore, you will drink beer because of those reasons. So when you look at all those, when we need to look at some of the stereotypes that are brought up in men's marketing, particularly around that machoification, that sort of thing, and how that's changing now and how you use that differently. One of the great stereotypes that's come into marketing for men recently is that men are idiots. Men are idiots that need women to correct them. This is a dramatic flip from back in the 1950s and 60s, where it was women were the helpless idiots in the home and men were the great dispensers of all the great wisdom. Now it's kind of flipped. We have Homer Simpsonified what men are like. And so it makes out that men are idiots and don't know what they're doing. Now, in many cases, men are idiots. We are much more likely to die in accidents because of stupid behavior. We are far more likely to die young because we make stupid decisions and do stupid things. Yes, in many cases, men are idiots, but not all men are idiots. In fact, most men are not idiots. Otherwise, there wouldn't be many of us around. But what it's saying is there's a stereotype that men are risk takers. Men are not in a good way. They're risk takers who put themselves and everyone around them at unnecessary risk. And they become lazy in their thinking. They become lazy in the way they connect with the world. And whilst that may be very true for baby boomer men, and it may be quite true for the Generation X of mine, it's actually not true for millennials. millennials, and certainly not true for Generation X, Generation Z. So the idea that men are idiots is a stereotype that's been used again and again from sitcoms on television in the 90s and the zeros particularly. If you look back at things like Seinfeld, every man in it was presented as an absolute idiot. George Costanza was the bumbling, stumbling ultra idiot. And then you look at things like Mad About You, where Paul, whatever his name was, Paul Schaefer, I think his name was, up with Helen Hunt. And between the two of them, she was always the one who was making the sensible decisions, and he was the idiot who was always going off on a rant. So we see that repeated again and again in TV shows. So this is now something that's flipping around, is the idea that men are more nuanced. Men are a bit more complex than what we gave them credit for. Men are not just idiots. Another one is that men have simple pleasures and simple routines, and they don't like changing them. I remember working in radio, and one of the great things we were told is the reason why we aim everything in this radio station towards women is because men's tastes are fixed in place. Men pick out what they like in music at a teenager, and it never changes throughout their lives. So that's the case for my father. He got set with Elvis when he was young, and several rock and roll gods at the time, and he's never changed his love of music. It's always been the same stuff. But my mother's love of music has changed as she's got older, but she might have loved listening to Little Patty as a kid, but then as she's grown, it became ABBA in the 70s and 80s, and then as her tastes have changed, she's then discovered that she loves show tunes and everything from Marina Pryor and Sarah Brightman and all the divas of theatre that she loves in there. And I'm thinking myself, I think, well, yeah, a lot of my tastes in music were fixed in place during a teenager. But then I've listened to new music much more lately, and I go, I really, really enjoy this. I'm not too ashamed to say there's a couple of Justin Bieber songs from the last few years I actually find myself humming along to. So that change has happened, that we are not just fixed in place by our tastes when we were young. Certainly not as teenagers. That has changed. We're now much more nuanced and complicated, and just like women, have a life of changes, a life of different tastes, and in being introduced to new things. We're not so stuck in where we came from that we can't look forward to trying something new. In fact, it's that desire to try new things that makes it a great news for us as marketers of businesses, because we've now got a chance to reach someone with something new. Whilst it's still difficult to change someone's behavior through marketing, it's much easier to at least get the message in front of them through things like social media, through ads on Facebook and search ads on Google, and video content on things like TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube. So yeah, that stereotype's broken down as well. The other stereotype that's broken down a lot is that men hate shopping. Now, I don't particularly love going shopping myself, but I do enjoy my grocery shopping. It's one part of my week that I actually kind of like. I like putting together these ideas of what meals I'm going to cook and reading labels, and it's become a little bit of a game for me, I think. But the idea that flat out men hate shopping, and that you need to have special seating areas in shopping centers where men can rest and not have to go into shops all the time has broken down a lot. All you need to do to know that difference is to go into Bunnings on a weekend, or go into BCF or any of those boating, fishing, and camping kind of stores over anything. It just makes a huge difference that they could walk on in. And Athena's actually put a really good point in the chat here. Can you do my shopping, please? Because what we've discovered is that not all women love shopping either, particularly when it comes to that clothing, the window shopping, the idea from the 90s where we would all window shop. We'd go to our local Westfield shopping town or our local big mall, and we just wander aimlessly through, looking at what's new, what's going on, and seeing what specials they are, and trying clothes on endlessly. Oh my God, I couldn't think of anything worse than that. Jan, my idea of hell too. I agree with you. I cannot stand that stuff, but I don't hate shopping. In fact, I like shopping when I know what I'm going shopping for. That I think what men used to hate about shopping was that wandering aimlessness, not the task-oriented shopping. I need to get groceries. I go to the place, I go to Coles, I go to Woolies, I get my groceries, I come home. It's that endlessly wandering through, looking for one thing, spending 3 hours and buying one thing, rather than going to Bunnings, knowing what we need to get, getting it and getting home and getting on with the job. I think that's how what a lot of people say is the death of retail, is just because we're just so sick of the process. We'd rather just go in and get the thing and get out. I avoid my local shop, my big shopping center, which is Casuarina Square, and I avoid it like the plague. It is the closest shopping center to me. It's about a 15-minute drive. I will deliberately drive 40 minutes to get to the one at Coolalinga, to the Kmart there rather than going to one at Casuarina because it's less people, it's less crowded, and I can get straight in the door at Coolalinga and not have to worry about parking in horrible crowded conditions and dodging people all over the place. And like Sienna said, these days we look it up online. Then we go and get it. We get in, we get out, we get home. It's a very different experience. So all those signs, all those different things that are happening around us, well, they are designed to get us interested in other things. But if you're like me, you ignore all that. You just go straight to your shop, you get your thing, you get the hell out of there because you can't stand the environment. And that's becoming a lot more common where the sensory overwhelm of the shopping experience, the noise, the lights, the sights, everything yelling at you to buy it, it becomes very overwhelming to a lot of people. And with now our ability to much more easily diagnose people with various autism spectrum disorders, we can say very, very quickly that, yes, this is one of the things that sets people off. The bright lights, the loud noise, the people screaming and children screaming. It's just a horrible experience to go through. It's actually a really negative experience. So men don't hate shopping necessarily. They just hate the act of shopping for the sake of shopping rather than shopping to get something they want. So that sort of opens up an idea that, you know, that we can actually look at these very differently, and rather than glamorizing the shopping, just getting to the point of this is what you need, we've got it, and here's why you want to buy it from us. We also have this idea on our heads that men make very logical decisions when it's shopping. I don't know if you've ever been to a hardware store like Bunnings, but men will sit there and they will obsess over 3 different fertilizers for the lawn. There's 3 different fertilizers, every single one with the same active ingredient, but they will make, eventually they'll make a decision that's either based on price or they'll make it based upon what they feel emotionally connected to, which is usually why there's different colors and different presentations and different ideals. They're on the labels of these tubs of grass fertilizer, of lawn food. And it's to make people make a decision that's much more emotional. They're not basing that decision over whether it works. They're not making that decision over necessarily what the price is. They're making it because they feel like this particular brand appeals to them. And that's the same with walking into a shop and picking a shirt that you go, well, this shirt is great for work. I can also wear it out to events, or, oh my God, that shirt's amazing. People are going to love me in that shirt. And then you make a decision based upon an emotional call rather than a logical call. So this idea that men have this great overriding logic and they shop on that is basically a load of phooey. We are just as emotionally shopping as what women are. We do exactly the same process. We go in there with our plan. We go in there to buy this one thing, especially Kmart. Kmart's a trap like that. You go in there to buy this one thing from Kmart. For me, it might have been dog treats because they've got some really good dog treats for that dogs really like. And then I go in there, I walk out with, you know, a queen size bamboo sheet set, 3 fake plants, a picture for the wall, and a set of bathroom scales because, you know, it's cheap and it's easy and it's there. And basically, I kind of like those things. So I'll make an emotional decision to buy them. So that logic thing, let's throw that out the door and now look at how we actually do market to men, particularly in an online world where we're talking about social media. We're talking about TikTok and Reels and websites and YouTube and all these different options to market to. It's never as the hardest part is not actually the advertising itself or the marketing itself. It's going, where do I start? Like, how do I actually talk to men? Because, you know, I might not be a man myself, or I might be a man and I don't really know how to reach other men because all marketing theory for the last 50 years has been geared towards marketing to women between 25 and 39. It's still what most radio stations are attuned to. So I know that Mix 104.9, Hot 100 in Darwin, they're the 2 main radio stations. Both of them are aimed at 25 to 39-year-old women. In Brisbane, it'll be things like 97.3, Nova, B105. They're all based towards women. The highest rated radio stations are all tend to be based towards women. The only ones that really are based towards men are the hard rock stations, Triple M, that kind of station, or ones like the talkback radio stations are the ones that have angry old men talking to other angry old men about the things that make angry old men angrier. Those kind of radio stations are geared towards men, but most music stations are geared towards women between 25 and 39. And the advertisers know this. That's why they all flock to them, because it's easier to get advertisers to advertise to those demographics than what it is to the men-oriented radio stations. So one thing that we have to understand in 2023 is men actually now care about how they look. But once upon a time, the picture of the slob on the lounge, while there's still plenty of them, but overall, men now do give a damn about what they look like. So what you do to get to someone who you want to advertise something like skincare to is that you need to state that you know that it's important for that man looks good and why. You know, we know you need to look good at work. We know you need to look good when you're out there in the dating world. We know you want to look good. So it's actually repeating it back and saying, we know you want to look good. We get it. You want to look good for that date. We get it. You want to look good when you walk into the office on Monday morning. And then we normalize the fact that this is a very normal behavior for men. All men want to do that. We all want to look good. We take away that mystery that wanting to look good as a man is not a girly thing. It's not a thing which is just for women. It's not a thing that just only. It's not about women putting on mascara in a mirror. It's actually about just the wanting to look good because it makes you feel good. It makes you feel confidence. Confidence comes from looking good, and so you make these obvious connections between the outcomes that a man could get from looking good. You know, if you're looking good, you're going to be more confident. And more confident people attract more people to them, whether that's in dating, whether that's in getting a job, whether that's just wanting to look good in your social circle. When you turn up and you've got a fresh faded haircut and that sharp beard, other men will look at you and go, yeah, I want to be like you. Where'd you get that done? And that's the kind of conversations that are now happening. We're not just talking about the weather and the fishing and the football. Now we're talking about, what's the barber you go to? Man, he did an awesome job of that. We give each other compliments now, surprisingly enough. Men complimenting other men on their looks. And you thought only women did that. Well, it's changed. Men now care about how they look, and they want to look as good as their best looking friend. Men feel things. So you empathize with that struggle of feeling things. We saw that in a couple of those sample ads, the one from Gillette, the one from Dove, the one that was showing us about that men are feeling things and they feel great emotions when it comes to knowing that you know their wife or their partner is pregnant. So we empathize with that you know, we were expected to not feel things. We're expected to walk around like we're mindless zombies who have no feelings. But the reality is that we do struggle. So empathizing that, it's like that one statement you can make is, we get it. It's hard to be a guy sometimes. There's so many expectations on you that you have to live up to, but you don't feel like you're living up to them because they're not you. You feel like you're acting all the time. And then again, we normalize that. You empathize with it, then you normalize. So empathizing is say, we get it. You know, it's hard to be you. Now we're showing it as a normal thing. But did you realize that asking this question is a completely normal thing? Every man is going through his life and going, is this who I really am? Is this who I want to be? Do I want to be my father? Or do I want to be my own man? And then avoid any sort of really weird like connections, which are like trying to connect a product through to that feeling. So it's saying, yeah, it's hard to be you. What you need is something easy in your life. And we got the easy product just for you. You don't want to do that. It's weird. It's icky. It feels you know, really cheap. And it's like drawing someone in and making them trust you because you understand them and then they feel understood. And then you immediately try to sell them a network marketing scheme and try to sell a powder, a potion, or a pill and saying, join my team. You'll be part of my downline and get on a Zoom call on Wednesday nights. And then just suddenly, what have you done? You've just completely betrayed me. You've drawn me in, and then you betrayed that drawing in, that human connection, by trying to sell me something. So yes, you do have to sell something, but remember that touch points that happen between someone getting to know what your product is and then being ready to buy it. There's up to 30 touch points. You're not going to sell someone just by immediately drawing me and say, hey, by the way, buy this thing. That doesn't work anymore. And I don't know that it necessarily ever did. It's one of those things where we got this idea that we need to just go a numbers game and just like spray and pray our message out to millions of people. And hopefully a couple of people will come back and say, yes, I'll buy that. And then when it doesn't happen, we go, I just wasted all this money. My marketing is terrible. It's because it's a weird connection to make when you empathize with someone and then you take the time to go, yeah, that's a normal thing. I know what you mean. And then you immediately try to sell them a solution. That's just weird. It doesn't feel like a human that's talking to you. It feels like a robot. Men are parents too. Surprisingly enough, we feel deeply for our kids. We live for our kids, and it's absolutely normal for us to express this, that our kids are this prime concern in our life, that our protection of our family and the people that we love is of supreme importance, that we'll lay down our life for our kids. That sort of thing is completely normal. But what has not been normal, it used to be like a really macho thing. Don't mess with my family, otherwise I'll come punch you out. That kind of thing was much more normal. What it is now is actually admitting and saying, I don't know what I would do if one of my kids was harmed. I just don't know how I'd be. I don't know what I'd feel. And it's not just men sitting around navel gazing, talking about their feelings. It's literally them going, I don't know how I feel. I don't know how to work with that. And I have a real fear of loss of my family. I have real fear that my kids, won't have the best possible opportunities to grow up to be powerful people themselves. You can see this in the relationship with dads and their daughters, where they're so protective of their daughters, but rather than being protective and trying to wrap them in cotton wool, what they are is protective and making sure that their daughter can have the best possible set of opportunities in life. It is absolutely normal to express this, and for you to actually tie into that and go, we know you care deeply for your kids, rather than saying, I know you'd do anything for your kids. You care deeply for your kids. Every cut, every scratch, every bruise, you feel it to your core. You want to save them all the time. Actually expressing those feelings that we're going on back at us does something. It helps us to empathize. We go, you get me. You understand me. I'm much more willing to listen to what you have to say and not feel like you're just someone trying to sell me something if you take the time to express to me what the things are that are going on in my head. Men also like shopping too. They like different kinds of shopping though. They might not like the kind of shopping that you like. They do prefer quick transactions. Now, this is not just women, just not just men. This is women too now. We've actually become very efficient shoppers. We don't want to wander aimlessly. We're not shopping for pleasure anymore. We shop with a mission. We like to have our transactions quick, tap and go. The advent of the self-checkout system in supermarkets is one of the best things that could have happened to us, because we don't have to have small talk with a 14-year-old who doesn't care. He says, hey, how are you? And then you go, yeah, good. Yeah, how are you? Oh, yeah, great too. And then you move on. You don't say another word to you until she says, that's $235.17. We just want quick transactions, quick interactions, direct referrals to things. We don't want to have to be wandering around streets looking for things. We just want to go, hey, can you give me the advice of where the best place is to go? And this is where referral marketing and influencer marketing really come through, where people are referring you to certain businesses. So if you can be in Facebook groups or on Instagram profiles where there's a referral made to your business, that is far more likely to reach someone than you just putting an ad on the local TV station or local radio station and just going, here, buy our stuff. We've got good stuff. Buy it from us. We like to have referrals. We like to be recommended. We like the safety of someone who we know or who we trust making a recommendation to us. Doesn't sound unlike the other side of humanity, being women. I think that's very common in both genders, to be honest. And then men make emotional buying decisions. We talked about this before. We often buy things to feel better. We buy things to get some idea of status, to show off, and we buy to impress others. That's why you still got that middle-aged man buying a sports car and an 18-year-old girlfriend. It's just the idea that we do make buying decisions based upon emotional reasons, not logical reasons. There's no reason for most men to own a Ford Ranger Raptor. That $88,000 monstrosity on the roads is not necessary for most of the people who drive them. Very few of the people who drive them ever go on a dirt road, let alone go in the sand and the mud. So owning that is all about an emotional connection they make of the masculinity of owning this big, tough-looking truck and your own sense of who you are as a man. So yes, we do make emotional decisions about buying too. We're not always completely logical. We also experience FOMO just like you do, fear of missing out. We like to be first. We like to be able to teach others about this thing that we've done. We like to be the expert in the room. Who hasn't come across a guy who likes to mansplain things? It's like, oh yes, what you really mean, what you're really trying to say, what you like. That whole idea, you could be talking to a woman who's a professor in astrophysics, and some guy will try and mansplain and say, what she's really trying to say is, we're really bad at that. And we just look like idiots when we're doing it. So we kind of play into that by making sure that, rather than someone saying, hey, buy this, you go, be the first in the crowd to get hold of this. Wouldn't you like to be the one who's showing this to your friends? I like to be an expert in what I do personally because it gives me a chance to be able to teach other people what it is and put it into some plain English rather than the tech talk that usually accommodates and goes along. And guys, yeah, Athena, we do it to our friends as well. The mansplaining, you can almost see the eyes rolling in conversations when the know-it-all friend or the one who likes to sort of one up everyone else in conversation is like, oh, I just went on a holiday to Bali. Oh yeah, Bali is just like so 1996. I've been going to Sabah for years, or I've been going to Pattaya, or I've been going to the wilds of India, and they've always got a better place to do, always trying to one up each other. So we do experience a bit of that FOMO because we do kind of like that sort of toss factor of being the first in there and the first early adopter. So I've got some hypothetical examples here as we start to finish up in skincare. So skincare, if you're marketing to men, things like formulated for men. Now, we know between us all that that's a load of rubbish. There's no such thing as formulated for men. The whole things is, that whole thing of being somehow it's made especially for men's skin, for the harsh environment of men's skin. Yeah, the harsh environment of being in an air-conditioned office 8 hours a day. And I can see how you'd need special things for that. It's that whole thing of being, that's just recognizing that he wants to know it's for him. He wants to know it's about him. So by packaging it for him, by packaging and formulate it for him, making the models in it that are quite relatable, what you'll tend to see a lot of these days is while a lot of things like body sprays, cosmetics, perfumes for women are usually by skinny models who are supermodels and superstars. With men, you'll tend to find, apart from say your David Beckhams and the occasional actor from one of the Marvel movies, most of what we see for things that are made for men show much more average kind of looking guys because we're a little bit fragile. We haven't built up that muscle in our minds against being advertised to by people who look nicer than us. So we're a little bit more fragile. So there's a lot more guys that aren't have the perfect bodies. They don't have the perfect look. They don't have the perfect hair. They might have a little bit of a belly, but they look just like us. So we feel safer going with that. If you're working in areas like counseling, NLP, hypnotherapy, that talking about being private and discreet allows a man to feel like he's got some control over a situation where he feels out of control. This works for women too. The idea that you can provide some sense that you have some control over the situation when you feel like you have no control over your life, and that things like therapy, counseling are all a normal part of life. We find with men too, less scented candles and soy wax melts and Eastern esoteric music and Tibetan prayer bowls in it, the better that he feels. He feels there's a little less woo going on, a little less of all that stuff going on. And it's more about, let's get some outcomes. Let's make it a process-oriented thing rather than let's go exploring. It's more like okay, we're going to go from here to here and this is how we're going to do it. We do find that men do prefer that. They feel like a little bit like if it's a process and it's defined, and they can expect an outcome, they feel a lot happier than walking into someone who kind of takes them on some sort of deep mental and spiritual journey. We say that fashion for men is about standing out but not too much. You want to stand out but still be seen to be normal. By linking fashion to male celebrity looks, so going, okay, this is what Jake Gyllenhaal's wearing, this is what Tom Holland's wearing, this is how you can pull off that look as well. What we also look for is those multi-purpose examples. We're not looking for things that we can wear out. We want to see things that we can wear anywhere. We can wear this to the pub, we can wear it to the work, we can wear it to a function. It's multi-purpose. We like multi-purpose with our clothing. We don't like clothing that's fit for purpose, apart from fishing shirts and rugby jerseys and football jerseys, those kind of things. We will wear those everywhere if we can. But the reality is if we need to look good, we want to make sure we can look good in multiple different situations with the same thing. With technology, we like comparisons. We like the fact that it's useful. Show us how this is useful for our life and tie it to a real world performance in our work or in our ability to be able to use things. Remember, we like to be the expert. We like to mansplain sometimes. So think about how we can tie what the benefit of that particular technology is and a real world case or scenario where we can use it. In services, think about the measurable time saving or the measurable money saving that can be in there. Not just saying, wouldn't it be nice to get someone else to do this for you? Say, tie it to time saving or money saving and connect with those things that they could be doing instead of the thing that you do for them. So that what it gives them time to do, it gives you the time to do the things that really matter. It gives you time to buy the things you really need to buy. And then you can tie those through to things like family, kids. You know, instead of spending time doing this, you can spend more time getting to know your kids. Instead of spending money on this, you can put it towards that big holiday you've been planning on going to with the family. So to tie it all up, there is no single men category to sell to. Marketing for men has changed a lot. As we've seen, it's changed for women as well. There's a lot of old stereotypes that we're still kind of tear down. And we need to understand the complexities of advertising to men. It used to be very simple, you know, show power over women, show power over other men, and show us that something's sexy and we buy it. Nowadays, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. It's not quite the same. So if you want more of this, you probably know the deal. 3 hours, 1 hour of 1 hour coaching sessions, 4+ hours of workshops and webinars. If you haven't already used it, you've got till the end of March. So $44 at this location, digitalsolutions.businessstation.com.au. Here's all my details on the screen. You can get in touch with me if you've got any questions to ask, if you'd like to clarify anything, if you'd like me to send you, you should be sent the recording of this so you can go through it again. But hopefully what I've given you is a bit of an insight into the trends when it comes to advertising to men and to market towards men, the things you've got to think about that aren't the same as what we may have assumed, and to break down some of those stereotypes so you can think more in terms of, you know, how do we approach men in a way that isn't patronizing? How do we approach men in a way that isn't just playing off those old stereotypes? Thank you so much. We finished on time. I hope you have a fantastic week. This summer series continues right to the end of the month. So I've got another couple of these this week and next week as well. Thank you and have a great week.